Hi everyone. Um, we'll try to finish the discussion that we were not able to finish today about the proof and also the relative valuation. So I will repeat a bit about the two methods or two special formulas that we saw in last Wednesday and also this morning. Okay. So I hope you still remember we have three special cases, or actually two special cases and one more realistic case where you combine all the scenarios. So the first scenario is called the constant cash flow, like constant cash flow or constant dividend if you use the dividend as a representative of your cash flow. So constant cash flow. So I mean, we saw the formula, we saw the final formula here. If you have an asset, the value estimate of your asset, for example, a stock. So the value estimate of a stock would be the constant cash flow divided by the required return, right? And if you use the dividend discount model, of course, the dividend would be the representative of your cash flow divided by the required return of your stockholders. So I just, my intention here is to show you that, this formula doesn't suddenly come from like nowhere, out of the blue, but actually is a derivation of the common formula, the present value of future cash flows. So let's try to prove it again a bit. You still remember that the value of any assets, right? The value of any assets, including a stock, would be the present value of future cash flows. So you have like the first dividend, the second dividend, the third dividend, and so on. So we have like dividend 1 plus required return by stockholders to the power of 1. Then dividend in period 2 discounted back at the required return by stockholders to the power of 2, and so on until the last one, of course, 1 plus required return by stockholders to the power of infinity. Right. But you see the first case here, the first case says that this is a constant cash flow scenario. So because it's constant cash flow, you can imagine like dividend would be the same, right? The cash flow would be the same for all periods. Okay. So now we want to see how the constant cash flow method is reflected, and finally we'll get the formula here. So just imagine if we use against a certain manipulation of mathematics here. So let's say the VS is multiplied by 1 plus required return by stockholders on both sides. Okay, so both sides, so the right hand side will look like this, like 1 plus required return by stockholders divided by 1 plus required return by stockholders. And then the second one multiplied by 1 plus required return by stockholders divided by 1 plus required return by stockholders to the power of 2, and so forth. Right? So essentially this is what? This is D1, this is D2, and so forth, right? And what would be the last one? The last one would be dividend, the constant dividend, 1 plus required return by stockholders divided by 1 plus required return to the power of infinite or infinity. And you can imagine, because we do it this way, you can cancel out this one, and then this one, you cancel out one of them, and so on. For this one, for the last one, you cancel out, or you drop this one, but this one will become infinity minus 1. Okay, so we get this one, the value estimate of a stock multiplied by 1 plus required return by stockholders. Right. So if we do a further manipulation here, so let's say we are doing this, okay, this one minus the original value estimate. Okay, so you can imagine from what we just did above. The first one is dividend, okay, plus dividend divided by 1 plus RS plus, so this one maybe like dividend divided by 1 plus RS to the second to the power of 2 or squared, and then the last one would be dividend divided by 1 plus required return by stockholders to the power of infinity minus 1. Okay, this is this one, right? This part. Now we minus the original VS, this one, the value estimate of a stock. So we find that minus here, minus, you can imagine like what's the original value? So dividend divided by 1 plus RS, see above there. Okay, plus constant dividend again, 1 plus RS squared and so on. And the last one is dividend divided by 1 plus RS to the power of infinity. Okay, and see the sign here is minus, right? Minus. So we can imagine this will cancel out this one. Okay, this one will cancel out this one, and so on. Right? And this one will be cancelled out by the one before the last one. I can imagine here it would be, yeah, if I write it right, the right one, what's that, one right before the last would be like this. Okay, so we cancel out this one. So what remains, or what remain would be constant dividend minus, because it's minus here, constant dividend divided by 1 plus required return by stockholders to the power of infinity. And of course, we did it also in the class this morning. We could write it this way: dividend, so 1 minus 1 divided by 1 plus required return by stockholders to the power of infinity. Okay, and you can imagine, like, if there is a number, you try to compound it to infinity, then this would be closer and closer to, like we have a number here, 1, right, divided by, yeah, certain, some 1 plus a certain number compounded to infinity, then this will approach 0, right? A number divided by a larger and larger number, so this will approach 0. So you could write it this way: constant dividend multiplied by 1 minus 0, or the constant dividend itself. And you see the left hand side here, it would be a bit above there. So the value estimate multiplied by 1 plus required return by stockholders minus the original value estimate. So yeah, immediately you can just do the simple algebra or mathematics. Value of the stock plus what's that again? VS multiplied by required return by stockholders, okay, minus VS is equal constant dividend. So we cancel out this one. So we get value estimate should equal the constant cash flow divided by the required return by your stockholders. Okay, so you get this one. So we essentially we are saying that if the scenario is a constant cash flow scenario, then the normal present value formula could be represented or could be reduced into this formula. Okay, and you saw the no, you saw the proof, right, for this one. Okay, so this is the first scenario, a constant cash flow. And the second method that we were not able to finish today because of the also the mathematical, proof, and also the time limitation. So the second scenario is constant growth forever. Constant growth forever. So what is constant here? The growth, and the growth is constant forever. Okay, and you saw it today. If you want to determine the value of a stock, value of an asset right now, so I call it phi zero or phi null, NULL. So phi null or phi zero, you should equal the next cash flow. Okay. So if this is time zero, the next cash flow would be time one, right? Divided by the required return by stockholders minus the constant growth forever. Okay, because if you talk about the dividend discount model, then this would be the next dividend. Right? So next dividend divided by the required return by stockholders minus the constant growth forever. How do we get this? Yeah, we can try to prove it again. So imagine the normal present value method, right? The normal present value, you can call it Vs or V0 if this is time zero. So phi null or phi zero should equal, right, the dividend one plus required return by stockholders to the power of one, and d2 to the power of 2, and so on. Okay. Then the second last one would be dividend at infinity minus 1 by the 1 plus required return by stockholders to the power of infinity minus 1. And the last one would be dividend at time infinity, 1 plus required return by stockholders to the power of infinity. Right, this is the basic formula. So how do we get now the final version of the constant growth forever scenario? Then we do some manipulation in mathematics. Right? So let's imagine the phi s or phi null multiplied by 1 plus required return by stockholders divided by 1 plus constant growth, 1 plus growth. Okay? So we have to do the same thing to all above, right? So D1, you can imagine that originally you have this one, but now you multiply it by 1 plus RS divided by 1 plus growth. Okay, and then for the second one, you have originally you have this one, then you multiply it with 1 plus RS divided by 1 plus growth, okay, and so forth. Then the last one, and the original version would be like this. Okay, now we multiply it with 1 plus RS, 1 plus growth. Okay, so with this information, you can imagine that you will cancel out what? You cancel out this one, okay? And then you have D1. You still remember D1 should equal, is it D null, D0 multiplied by 1 plus growth, right? So we can cancel out here. So we get D0 remains for the first part of the right hand side. And then of course this one, you can erase this one. Now these two become 1. Okay, and D2 is what? D2 is D1 that grows. D1 that grows, right? So you eliminate this one, you eliminate this one, and so on, right? So on. Here, this one, you can see you eliminate this one. Now the infinity will become what? Infinity minus 1. Right? And then you have dividend of infinity, which is what? Which is dividend infinity minus 1 multiplied by 1 plus growth rate. Right, so you can erase this one. Okay, now you get something like this. Okay, we write down, make it clearer. So you have D0, dividend that has been paid, right? Plus dividend 1 divided by 1 plus required return by stockholders, and so forth. And the last one is what? Dividend infinity minus 1 divided by 1 plus required return by stockholders to the power of infinity minus 1. Okay. And this is what? V0 multiplied by 1 plus required return by stockholders, divided by 1 plus growth rate. Okay. Now what about if we do like another step of mathematical manipulation here? So I put like minus, right, minus the original fee null or fee s, the value estimate of the stock. So again, you minus. So what would be the fee 0? Yeah, would be this one. See? Okay. So let's put it down. So D1 1 plus RS plus D2 1 plus RS squared and so forth, right? The second last one, D infinity minus 1 divided by 1 plus RS to the power of infinity minus 1 plus, what's the last one? What's the last one? Okay. D, what's that? Infinity divided by 1 plus RS to the power of infinity. Okay, so you can imagine now this will cancel out this one, and then the next one will cancel out this one, and so on. This one will cancel out this one. So what remain would be D0, dividend that has been paid, and this one. So you see the sign minus, right? Minus. So D0 minus D at the time of infinity. Okay, this is minus, right? D infinity divided by 1 plus required return by stockholders to the power of infinity. Okay. And then What else do we have? The left hand side, we now 1 plus required return by stockholders, 1 plus growth rate, okay, minus fee now at the original one. Okay, so the same thing here. So I can change it a bit. This one, it would be like D null 1 plus growth rate to the power of, yeah, infinity, yeah, like this, right? Because previously, this is the dividend at the time of infinity, right? So D1 is D null or D0 that grows. D2 is D0 that grows squared, right? So can you imagine again that D1 would be D0 that grows, okay? D2 would be D1 that grows, or if the growth rate is constant forever, right, we can write it this way. So D0 that grows twice, right? Okay, so dividend at the time of infinity would be, yeah, dividend 0 that grows and compounded or to the power of infinity. Can write it this way. So you can imagine that we have D0, so we could write it this way. D0, D now, 1 minus 1 plus growth rate to the power of infinity divided by 1 plus required return by stockholders to the power of infinity. And the same thing here, assuming that RS is larger than growth rate, right? This is, I think, the common thing in the United States, right? Required return by stockholders is usually larger or higher than the constant growth forever. So you can imagine that you divide a certain number by another number to the power of infinity, then this will approach 0. So 1 minus 0 is 1, okay? So obviously, this will remain what? D0, a dividend that has been paid. So now we have to finish the left-hand side. Yeah, something that I didn't do properly today. So I just checked the algebra again. So 1 plus RS, 1 plus growth, minus phi 0. So I think we can write it this way. Because the phi 0 are the common what's that? Common component here. So we could write it like here. Okay, so 1 plus RS, 1 plus growth rate, minus 1. Right, it's proper to write it this way. Okay, should equal what? D0. Right, D0. From here, you can do another step of manipulation here. So you can write like phi 0, something like this, 1 plus RS divided by 1 plus growth rate, now minus 1 plus growth rate, 1 plus growth rate equal what? D0. Okay, because they have the same denominator. You can write it this way. Okay, and we can solve the left-hand side first. It will look like maybe like this. So 1 plus RS minus 1 minus growth rate divided by 1 plus growth rate equal D null. Okay. Then you see here, can cancel this one, cancel them out. Okay. So is it V null, V0? Like this, right? RS minus growth rate divided by 1 plus growth rate should equal B0. And of course, we can move it to the right-hand side, this one. Okay. And we can move this one also to the right-hand side. Okay, now D0 that grows is D1, right? So we can write it this way. If we are interested in the value estimate at time 0, this should be the next dividend divided by required return by stockholders minus the growth rate or constant growth rate forever. Okay, so we get the proof for the second spatial situation, right? For the second spatial scenario, constant growth forever, constant growth forever. Okay, and we have seen this one, and of course the third scenario would be, we call it like supernormal. Supernormal is a combination of everything. We saw it today in the class. Supernormal growth, meaning that growth rates are in stages. Okay, so they don't suddenly become like constant growth forever at once, but they go through, you know, like several steps. And this is, I think, the most realistic one, right? You can imagine if you have a product or you have a company, at first it will grow quite high, but it will be having a quite high growth at the beginning for the next maybe 5 years or 10 years, and then the growth rate will decline gradually, you know, for the next maybe 5 years, for the subsequent 10 years, and so on. And finally, at one point in time, the growth rate will be constant forever. So normal growth. Okay, so we have seen the calculation or examples of calculation in the class. So the next one that that we could not finish in the class was about the relative valuation. Okay, so relative valuation, as the name suggests, relative valuation. So we are comparing, you know, comparing the value of. We try to value a certain asset using comparisons, right? Using comparison, and we believe that the comparables are similar enough. Maybe both of them or all of them are in the same industry. Maybe they are owned by like certain types of owners, maybe private sector or the government or something like that. So let's imagine a simple example here. You want to know maybe the fundamental value, the theoretical value of, let's say, Under Armour, okay? Under Armour, and what would be the closest comparable to Under Armour? It might be Adidas or Nike, okay? Just assume that we believe that the fundamental value or the theoretical value of Under Armour can be reflected, can be represented by the fundamentals of Nike. Let's use Nike, okay? So let's look at the some ratios, okay? So in relative valuation, there are several ratios that are quite famous. The first one is price to earnings. okay? Price to earnings ratio. So we call it pair, PE, right? PE ratio. So it's very common to call it a pair, PE ratio. So the P is price, E is the earnings or net income, right? This is price per share. Because the price is per share, then the earnings should be per share as well. Okay, so essentially pair or PE ratio is price per share divided by earnings or net income per share. Okay, another famous ratio would be price to book. Price to book value. So what is the P? P is the price per share. Now what is the B? The B is the book value of equity per share. BV is the book value of your equity on your balance sheet. You look at your balance sheet, you have the equity item, equity account. What would be the total equity account? The amount of your equity. So book value of your equity per share. Okay, so we just look at one example. Maybe just use this one. Okay, pair or the price to earnings. Let's look at, for example, Nike. Okay? So let's look at, okay, we search Nike Corporation. Okay, we use this one, the NYSE at New York Stock Exchange. So look at the P/E ratio here, 3970. So the pair or the P/E ratio of Nike is 3970. Okay, so you can imagine pair means price to earnings per share equals 3970. So we believe that Nike would be one of the closest, one of the best comparable for Under Armour. Okay, and we believe that they should have a similar PE ratio. So we borrow the PE ratio of Nike to represent, the similarity or the closeness between Nike and Under Armour. So we believe that the pair of Under Armour should not be too far away from that of Nike, which is 39.70. Okay, now by believing or by knowing that the pair of Nike that would also represent that of Under Armour is 3970, then we just need to look at this one. What is the earnings per share of Under Armour? Yeah, so we go to the WSJ again, Wall Street Journal. So now we look for Under Armour. Okay, we have two classes here, class A, class C, but yeah, just use maybe class A, okay, as for example. So see the EPS here. The earnings per share of Under Armour is 79 cents per share. Okay, so we believe that the pair of Under Armour should not be too far away from that of Nike. That is 39.70, and now we find out that the earnings per share of Under Armour is 79 cents. If you look at the figure again, 79 cents. Okay, so mathematically, you can imagine, right? The price estimate or the value estimate, right, should equal 39.70 multiplied by 79 cents, right? And you get, what is it? $39.70 times 79 cents. Okay, 31.36. So we believe that the fundamental value of Under Armour should be around 31.36. Okay, So let's look at the real price right now. So the real price right now is 21.50 at 21.50. So the real price on the stock exchange is 21.50. So what is our suggestion now? What is our recommendation? We believe that according to the relative valuation technique or method, the theoretical value of Under Armour should be 31.36. But look at the real price, 21.50, which is too low. We call it what, undervalued. So the recommendation is to buy. So you offer buy recommendation. I mean, if you were a fund manager or a securities analyst or something like that. Okay, so this is an example of relative valuation. You can try other ratios like price to book ratio or uh, price to EBITDA or something like that. You can try any other famous relative valuation ratios, but the principles remain the same. Okay, I think that's all for today to complete our discussion because the time is so limited and we couldn't finish properly because we have to catch up with other materials as well next week and so on. So thank you. Enjoy your weekend. See you on Monday. Bye.